Hi, everybody. It's Amy Hedemio over here at Body Science. I'm the scientific director. And Body Science, we are a functional center down here in South Miami. One of the things that we are, I think, most known for at this point is our strategies when it comes to motor neuron disease. And so today we're going to look into overall strategies. I will go over a case study just to kind of give you a sense of things. And let me see if towards the end we can do questions and answers. I'm going to see if we can get through this in about 45 minutes. So if everybody's wondering how long will this take, but we can always extend if we need to. Okay, so first thing, and just to orient anybody that's watched me before knows already my philosophy on things. Motor neuron damage and the resulting disease, motor neuron disease or ALS, is a symptom. And so the goal is to identify and treat the actual cause, not the symptom. I'm going to identify a number of different causes and come up with a handful of different strategies during this Zoom webinar. I'm going to try and straddle between the practitioners that I think are on the line and people that are dealing with motor neuron involvement. I would tell you it can be a little bit tough to cover both and make sure that one part isn't too technical and that the whole thing is approachable. So let's see how it goes. Hang on for me. All right, step one. I've used this slide once or twice before. I'll always orient around this, and the reason, going back to the idea that we really are dealing with not so much a disease, but a symptom. And in multiple other talks that I've done, I've kind of described that philosophy. We know from a number of articles, a number of published research papers, that motor neuron disease starts only after, and oftentimes a median of 3 years after misfolding in proteins, TDP43 is occurring. And so the question is, why are people getting motor neuron damage that's ultimately leading to disease? What precedes it? And what are we treating? So here are kind of my guides, my step-by-step to look for clues of what you're trying to treat, because what we know is it's not really motor neuron disease. That's not the target of treatment, but rather the cause and what's going on. All right, so with that in mind, the question is why, if you're somebody that has motor neuron disease, why do you have it? If you're somebody treating motor neuron disease, what are you actually treating? Personal history becomes really important. Where did you grow up? What were you exposed to? Do you like the type of hobbies that would expose you to certain kinds of infections? Hunting and tick-borne infections being one of them, areas of lots of mosquitoes and something like West Nile. So personal history, just knowing where you came from, knowing your own zip codes, what those zip codes look like as far as possible toxic exposures. Your family history, for me, it's not a family history of motor neuron disease that I'm so focused on, but rather a family history of people developing conditions suggestive of immune dysfunction or even poor detoxification. And so aside from motor neuron disease, I'm looking for the sister diseases in a family, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And outside of that, I'm looking for autoimmune. So rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, type 2 diabetes, and to kind of get a sense of whether you may genetically be wired in a way where you are more predisposed than somebody else to either have a toxic load, regardless of the amount of exposure, the amount that you absorb, or don't metabolize properly, being higher than other folks. Think about it, that's living in a house and developing motor neuron disease, but the other people that are living in that same house are not getting sick, even if their exposures are the same. Or again, going to family history, are you predisposed genetically to autoimmune or immune dysfunction? Number three, so the time of onset becomes really important. What happened around it? Were you traveling outside of the country that you live in? Were you hospitalized for anything, on any medications for other non-related conditions? Were you sick with anything up to that point? I know for a lot of people that are watching, and a lot of times when I'll talk to people, I'll always do a Zoom call before people come on down. It's one of the questions I ask. And generally what I'll hear is people saying, look, I was perfectly healthy before this happened. But then when we really dig into it, what we find is less clear history of being fine, and instead a number of things in the recent history prior to motor neuron symptoms that are suggestive of a problem. So I would say don't just discount time of onset thinking that you were perfectly healthy before the initial symptoms that were motor neuron related started. Geographical exposures, I'll always do a search of the area. There was a woman yesterday, we were speaking, her city has not only perfluorates, which are very toxic, but it was rated as a city that has 160, so 160 times the allowable limit of perfluorate compounds. And so I like to get a sense of, are there super fun sites, or to say it differently, very, very toxic sites? Are there any reports of things leaking into the ground? Are there any neighbors that you know that are ill? Again, as a practitioner, if you're seeing people, these are the questions, of course, that you want to be asking, or at least I feel are very important. Detoxification genetics, we'll run them over here. So I alluded to them before under family history. It's the idea of having other family members, not necessarily that have motor neuron disease, but have other immune dysfunctions, whether it's Hashimoto's, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, but something that looks immunologic. You want to look for infections and a history of infections, and oral health. The reason for oral health, I think everybody's pretty aware at this point, whether we're talking about infections below root canals, whether we're talking about lots of amalgam or metal fillings and that contribution potentially of heavy metals, but you definitely want to take a look for oral health. Let me see, I'm going to stop share for a minute and I'll tell you the reason why. Hi guys, I'm going to see if I can't run a video for us. And because my laptop isn't great at running videos, I'll come out each time. So I'm going to show you before we get started what it looks like when somebody is regaining function. And so this is Tommy, and Tommy recently regained hand function. So you're talking about somebody that has motor neuron disease for a significant period of time and is now showing the beginning symptoms of improvement. Let me show you exactly what that looks like. And the very first movement in somebody that hasn't been able to have hand movement or move his hand in several years, with the diagnosis, of course, of motor neuron disease. Yeah, let me make this big. And let me see if I can put some volume on for us. You're looking at the very beginning. So again, somebody that wasn't able to move their hand. Everybody knows Tommy. And so this is the very beginning of it. I want to show you the next video. And the interesting part is we're talking about another video, or the next improvement, that's just a couple of weeks later. So you're looking at how fast you can see improvement. Let me go ahead and share the screen for us. All right, let me see if we can see it.
Tommy. And then his wrist for the first time. He's able to bend it back and forward. He hasn't been able to do that. He's done it better than that.
All right, let me show you guys the most recent. There's another video in between, but let me show you the most recent. I'll tell you what's astounding to me in this whole thing is the speed that this is happening. So now we're talking within 8 weeks, and here's Tommy and Anna, the man behind the hand.
But now, when I'm laying in bed, I can actually get my own hand to straighten out, my own fingers. So I roll them back and they'll stay in a relaxed position. And about 3 weeks ago, I started getting movement back in my fingers and my thumb. I'm gonna hold my arm up and so I can move my hands. I can actually touch my index finger with my thumb. Sometimes I can't. And I got some wrist got controlling my wrist left and right. Just don't have a lot of strength in it, but I'm able to move it back and forth now.
Wow.
And then, hold on. And like I say, I can move my fingers a whole bunch on that hand and this hand. Just about the same. Not able to straighten them out completely, but with gravity I can get them just almost straight.
You can touch your fingertips
Yeah.
a little bit again.
Yeah, there's sometimes I can touch my fingertips and other times I can't.
So remember, everybody, Tommy, that arm was just
I'll straighten
straight
my fingers.
by your side.
Yeah, I haven't
So-
moved it for, it's been at least a year and a half since I've moved that arm, really.
So now you're able to bring your arm out that.
It's able to move. It's not a fist anymore.
Yeah, I can tell. It's like you're stuck on the leather. Tommy, still, I mean, that's so impressive. The fact that you're able to bring your arm outside of your body, your arm just hung by your body. So the fact that you're able to bring your elbow all the way out there, the fact that you're able to move your wrist like that and have that wrist control, Tommy, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's more than
I know you're a perfectionist, so you're looking at it and you're like, why can't this be better? Tommy, we're talking about 8 weeks ago.
I'm
You
excited.
could not move your arm at all, and you had no movement of your hand. All right, guys, let me come on back. So the reason I'm showing you this, I don't think too many of us have been able to see up to this point what it looks like when somebody regains function. And so to be able at this point to have somebody and be able to actually watch 1 week after the next is kind of interesting. And the question going into this, how long does it take from the time that the underlying cause is treated to the time that somebody regains function? And the answer based on that video, what we're talking about is an 8-week period of time. And that most recent video was just a couple of weeks ago, which is the reason at this point, we don't have another update. Going back over now to this slide, right? That this again is the reason that we're going to always try and identify underlying causes. And the question is, when we do treat them, what will we expect to get? And looking again in the course of a very short period of time, or in Tommy's case, 8 weeks period of time, what is it that we could expect to see? Monitoring lab values. So very specifically, here's what we are talking about. Predictors of improvement versus predictors of progression. And so what we're using labs for, and what I'm going to show you next. So if Tommy's video was a picture of what we're looking to accomplish, what we're going to go through now is labs and lab values and how we're looking to impact levels on labs in order to expect the kind of improvement that we just saw. If lab values are not improving, then we wouldn't expect patient functional gains. And if they are, we know already this disease has a degree of momentum. So momentum for me is the fact that it can be very difficult to understand or to get a sense if somebody is not getting better or showing functional gains, or if you are watching this, you have this disease and you're not getting better. The question is, in an underlying way, are you improving? Meaning, if you could see behind the scenes and watch motor neurons and anticipate what's going to happen next, and you could hang in there, would you expect to get better, worse, or same? And I'll tell you, the key, you have to know it, right? If you're on the clinical side or you're a center treating motor neuron disease, you have to know what to anticipate next because the numbers are getting better, or change interventions because the numbers are getting worse. One way or the other, you're going to have to be able to have a sense or a group of predictors to understand progression versus worsening. On our side, pathogen loads of multiple different infections becomes important. And so whether that is tick-borne infections, whether it is herpetic infections, whether it is mold and fungal infections, pathogen load becomes important. The second, immune regulation. Is it a lot of the immune system that's either attacking or, so an autoimmune, or an immune system that really doesn't have the availability to go after the pathogens that we were just talking about. If you want to take a pathogen type of approach or go after infections, but the immune system isn't regulating properly, of course, you wouldn't expect to get a very good result. So you're always going to look to put that in place. And again, I'll show you labs so we can see numbers from a case study point of view. And then toxin levels. So toxin levels, anything, chemicals, metals, pesticides, things that are going to ultimately offset the immune system and impair the immune system's ability to be able to heal. Starting with that, I'm just going to show you a toxic level. This actually is Tommy's. And so the couple things, methylhippuric. So this is the parent compound, methylhippuric, as a 4-methylhippuric, and then converting to a 2-methylhippuric, a volatile organic compound, or the metabolite of toluene. So you can see this number 1 over here. I'll tell you what you're looking at is in a short period of time. So this is under a 3-month period of time. You're looking at 4 and 2-methylhippuric. We know that methylhippuric has a role in motor neuron disease. When you see these 2 references at the very bottom, it's kind of a classic approach of mine. Making ugly slides is not my intention, but it seems to always kind of look like that. The reason I'll put those snips over there is just to give a little confirmation about what's being discussed. So the question is, these methylhippurics, are they associated with motor neuron disease? We know that they are. We know that their level of inflammation or their measure of oxidative stress is this 8-hydroxy-DG at the top, which can actually be looked at on a separate lab. We're seeing in this case, the previous result, although the level is still here between the first and the second time, you can see the level coming down from an 1800 down to an 1100. And as well, the 4-methylhippuric, or the parent compound, coming down from that 1,958 to the 1,552. So what you're looking to do, and the reason you're trying to monitor toxins, number 1, if you're getting worse, or as a clinician, if you're watching somebody and they are getting worse, it may or may not be a treatment-related issue, meaning that may not be a treatment failure. You may be looking at ongoing exposure to a toxin. And so getting a baseline of these toxins becomes very important as a comparison point, and as well, being able to monitor them in order to anticipate improvement or worsening becomes important as well. You're looking at DEDTP and glyphosate as an organophosphate pesticide. DEDTP is very definitely associated not just with motor neuron disease, but with neuroinflammatory diseases as a family. Again, you can see this reference at the bottom, just describing how organophosphate pesticides are associated. No, because this is not really a full lecture, I won't go into each of the articles and show you the conclusions. Again, I'm just putting them as hyperlinks at the bottom, just so that you know, in fact, those relationships, those causal relationships exist. And so looking at pesticides, looking at volatile organic compounds, and multiple other toxins becomes important. What we're looking at is levels 67 down to a 29, a 9 to an 8.72. Not a significant improvement in glyphosate. We do know the relationship that glyphosate plays in destroying motor neurons by going after the glycine-rich region of the motor neuron. Again, that's why these numbers become really important and monitoring them. I'm going to jump ahead. So if we kind of go back to the slide that was saying toxins, infections, and your own immune function or dysfunction. The reason I covered toxins first, a little bit out of order, is just to cover it and then move forward, because the majority of what we're going to talk about now really is infection related. And from that vantage point, I want to start with Borrelia burgdorferi. It is an interesting infection in my estimation because we have found it to be IgM, or immune active, in the overwhelming majority of the people that we have tested who have motor neuron disease. And I think that is an interesting fact. The question is, could we get these levels under control? Now, very specifically, what you're talking about over here and what you're seeing is a result for somebody by the name of Donnie. And Donnie, if you're out there, hello. We showed a video of Donnie before. So here's where we've been already, looking at Tommy and regaining hand function in somebody that's had motor neuron disease for about 3 years and hasn't been able to move his hand or arm in a year and a half. Okay. What we're looking at now is somebody else who hadn't been able to move his legs. We're looking at tighter levels that show an improvement, and I'll walk you through what they mean, right? And then had functional gain as well. And so from a case study point of view, the question is, what are we doing over here? What are we doing to show improvements? Why are people coming on over here with this disease and getting long-lasting improvements? Why are we getting control over this disease? So what you're seeing over here, first of all, oftentimes a single Borrelia is measured. I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of people that have been tested come up with what we consider to be a false negative. And we've got plenty of people that come on over here and will tell us they are negative for Borrelia burgdorferi, otherwise known as Lyme disease. And then we'll test looking at multiple different Borrelia markers and find a very different story. Going over here, so starting on the right side of the screen, IgM. Just to get clear, IgM is an immune system, your antibodies at the time of the lab saying this is a threat. We understand it's a threat as the immune system, and we are actively going after it. Okay, so IgM is a body that's saying this is a current and present threat, and I am making, as an immune system, active and aggressive antibodies to go after it. By comparison, IgG is an immune system saying, hey, I know this infection. We as a body have had this infection and gotten sick from it before. The infection is still here, whether it's under biofilm or somewhere else. And I'm going to continue to monitor it, hoping it doesn't reactivate into IgM. Here's what we know through the multiple sclerosis studies. IgG, which used to be referred to as dormant, is now understood as stealth, meaning it can still cause disease and oftentimes will cause disease, even though the immune system doesn't make IgM antibodies. Okay, I know it's a lot of science. Keep in mind, I think there's two kinds of folks that are on this call. People dealing with the condition, right? The warriors, and everybody else, me included, trying to get a better understanding of what this is, get better control, and get functional outcomes, control this disease. And so now let's just take a look at it before and after. You're looking at the before, which is this 20.9, this 11.9, this 13.7 in the active category. Treatment, and then post-treatment, you're seeing this active come down to a 14.4, right? You're seeing this jockey for position a little bit, which is the elevation over here. The IgG, this is somebody that had been treated multiple times, and I'll show you that on the next slide. And in spite of ongoing treatment for an extended period of time, so multiple years, this IgG, or stealth pathogen load or number of antibodies that the immune system is making to try and control this infection is fierce, right? So you can see when Donnie came in, and this is where he started with us, these levels were very poorly controlled in spite of multiple attempts at treatment for multiple years. And then with treatment, this is where levels landed. And so again, let's talk about different treatments and different treatment options. Our goal, of course, is not just treat, but treat to a point of success. And more importantly, treat to the point of getting functional gains. So whether it is Tommy regaining use of a hand in the course of 8 weeks, or whether it is Donnie, and I'll show you his video, regaining function in his legs, we are using these labs to understand what's going to happen next, right? Let's say that these numbers, these red numbers, are becoming even worse. You're not going to expect that the person that you're treating, or if you're the person dealing with this, you're not going to expect that you're getting better. And so it's a good way to determine efficacy of treatment, whether or not additional treatment is required. And again, whether or not you would expect over time to see improvements or not. One thing is certain. If there's a treatment and levels do not improve or they worsen, you would not expect that you're looking at somebody that's going to be getting better. And as well, from our vantage point here at this center, we would not continue doing that treatment, right? We would change gears entirely, because what we're really seeing is somebody that is not responding to that treatment. And in this condition, motor neuron disease, ALS, because it is such an aggressive condition, you don't really want to sit there continuing week after week or month after month looking for changes from a treatment that is not showing improvements. And circling back one more time to Tommy and the reason, remember, you're looking at an improvement in the course of 8 weeks. So the question is, if you treat and the treatment is effective, would you expect, number one, to see improvements? And number two, would you expect to see improvements that are fast? Now, it's not always the case. There is very definitely a degree of momentum. And remember, oftentimes there may not be improvements, but if lab values are moving in the right direction, you would anticipate to see lab or improvements rather that start to show up. Doesn't change the fact that an 8-week functional gain is very definitely something that can be accomplished. And so that becomes kind of the standard for all of us. Inflammatory cytokines. So the question is, going back to the top 3 things that we looked at: pathogens, toxins, immune system. All right. So on the immune system, and using these labs again to anticipate what's going to happen next. The person that you're working with, are they getting better, worse, or staying the same? And so what you can see over here, this going from right to left. So this far right side, these are your ranges, reference ranges, meaning you need to be below this level not to flag. Okay. And as you approach this number, even though you're not flagging, you're kind of on the higher side of where you do not belong. And inflammatory cytokines, you are looking at kind of the heart of the chronic immune system. So what's a body saying about getting better, getting worse, staying the same? Really, what's the overall health of the immune system? Is the immune system saying attack, attack, I'm panicked and I need to go after things? Or is it an immune saying, okay, I feel better. So if it was a threat, and for example, going to that tick-borne lab that we looked at, you saw the IgG or immunoglobulin G levels that were very high and then came down. Would you expect, if that is in fact the underlying cause of that person's motor neuron damage, would you expect, as the levels of antibodies for Borrelia burgdorferi in that case are coming down, would you expect as well the panic from the chronic immune system being seen through the lens of inflammatory cytokines to come down as well? And the answer, of course, is yes. If you were to treat Borrelia burgdorferi and see titer levels come down, but inflammatory cytokines are trending up, you think you have the right infection under control at that point? Probably not. And no matter how many additional times you look to treat Borrelia burgdorferi, chances are, even if the numbers are slightly elevated, that's not the infection at the heart of that problem. And so inflammatory cytokines, again, it is the chronic immune system. It's one of the most powerful parts of the immune system. You're looking at kind of the brain or the heart of the immune system saying either I've got a problem or I have things under control. So now going from right to left, and the reason right, I get it's a little bit counterintuitive, is the oldest lab. So let's look at the oldest lab, interleukin-1. So what is a gut kind of saying about the amount of inflammation? You can see reference range, don't be above a 4.9. The initial lab, a 13.5. We get up to a 14.7, and then we can see that it's starting to settle down. Interleukin-4, it's the body's control in order to reduce inflammation. So interleukin-4 starts kind of orienting how panicked is a body. 20.8 on the far right side, panic, make antioxidants, try and control this inflammation. Kind of that middle lab, a couple of months later at the 15, and about a month after that, a 14.9. So the switch to throw out antioxidants coming down, interleukin 15, both a mediator, a modulator, and also an inflammatory protein coming down, right? The 11.4, the 11.8, and now a 9.3. What's interesting, interferon gamma, you're looking at protein synthesis. It's about the same. So a body that may in fact be making proteins in order to control infections. And then probably the most important and interesting is that tumor necrosis factor alpha. It is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, inflammatory makers or inflammatory cytokines that the body can throw out there. A 9.4 is a body that is fairly panicked, right? TNF alpha. Controlling TNF alpha is a strategy of a lot of rheumatologic medication. So when people have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, TNF alpha is commonly elevated, and a lot of medications that are used to control those diseases are very specifically used to down-regulate TNF alpha, meaning TNF alpha to a large extent is synonymous with the idea of inflammation. And so do we want to see it come down over time? And again, this is about a 4-month period of time. Yeah, we do, because we're trying to get a better understanding of whether or not things are trending in the right direction. Well done, guys. Okay, I know this slide is number 1, an ugly slide. Number 2, just a super chaotic slide. So let me just orient us. You are looking at lymphocyte mapping. So if the tick-borne levels that we looked at, the Borrelia burgdorferi levels that we looked at a handful of slides back, if that is a measure of counting antibodies. So you're looking at the immune system right now in 3 different ways. The first, antibodies. So things that the body is making to try and attack bad guys. Okay, thing number 2, inflammatory cytokines. So the slide that we just came from, what is the immune system saying about how it feels and how the body is doing health-wise? Does the immune system see a threat, and is it on full attack mode, or does the immune system feel like things are managed and are manageable, and so it's not trying to build a bunch of fires? Bodies are commonly either going to build fires, oxidants, inflammatory cytokines, or they're going to repair, antioxidants. And you're typically not going to be in both, right? So you're either making fires or putting fires out and healing tissue. And when you're dealing with a disease like motor neuron or anything that is progressive and destructive, you need to know, is the immune system making fires? Is the immune system putting out fires? There are often times where when the immune system is building fires, you want to support the fire building, right? It's going after infections. Can you help it destroy those infections? And as well, there are times where you want to help it repair. We are looking at a before and after. The before is on your right side. The after is on your left side. The before is a lymphocyte count. So we talked about the first 2 components of the immune, not really in order, just pieces of the immune, antibodies, and then inflammatory cytokines. We're looking at now what is referred to as lymphocytes, and T cells fit into that category. And T cells, when it comes to motor neuron disease, is something that we're all very familiar with. That was the study that was done in clinical trial to infuse T cells, thinking that the more T cells or lymphocytes, which is what's on that top line, the higher the army, the more soldiers, the more likely somebody could battle or overcome or successfully treat motor neuron disease. I would tell you that the findings from that were less supportive of the idea that the number, the higher the number, equals the higher the success. Instead, it looked more about the ratio of different lymphocytes, which you can see over here in the before. You can see a pretty dismal 751. So that's that top level, and the count that's right over here. You're looking at a range between 1,200 and 3,200. Our preference when we're treating is always over 1,000. We're shooting for 2,000, but more importantly, and the question that this lab answers, first of all, can we treat? Can we go after infections? Could we do it here at a 751? Well, we could, but that person doesn't have a lot of defenses of their own. So going after infections is almost like opening a door, letting all the infections out, hoping the immune system can do its part, but it's an immune system that's already exhausted. And so that's, I think, how immune systems lose the battle and how strategies intended to fight infections ultimately wind up leading to worsening symptoms and progression. All right. You're seeing the increase now over this length of time, and we'll talk about how to do that to a 942. More importantly, you're seeing CD8s elevate when before they were not. So you're getting a sense, and this is more of a practitioner slide, but I promise to follow up with a warrior slide. So if you have this disease, what do you want to do to build your lymphocytes and gain T cells? Still, we're going to go to the science of this slide to get there. And so what you're really seeing is a CD8 group that's elevating by comparison to a CD4. You're seeing killers by comparison to helpers. Clinical folks that are on this call, of course, that's incredibly important, talking about the timing and when to go after pathogens. This is largely going to drive a lot of those decisions. And again, I think oftentimes this is at the heart of why treating infections doesn't always lead to successful outcomes. You're going to, of course, need an immune system that you're partnering with that has enough of its own army as is set in the right mode, right? Killers versus helpers to be able to do what you need to do. All right, so now let's go to the protocols, right, for practitioners and everybody that's dealing with it. For me, I'll normally refer to you guys as warriors. You are day in and day out doing something that the majority of us, I don't think, could do, which is getting up to fight the same fight. And I tell you, if that's not warrior, I don't know what is. So that's my standard phrase for everybody that's dealing with motor neuron disease, because again, you wake up every day ready to fight this fight. And so it's a partnership between the folks that are treating and the folks that have this. And there's a lot of things that can be done on both sides. So now let's talk, because we're coming out of the immune part of things. And because we're coming out of the immune part of things, and before we get into an after slide or a video looking at Donnie and talking more about that specific case study, let's talk about where you need to be even before that treatment or during that treatment. Okay, a pre-treatment protocol, and this one is designed specifically for practitioners, but the slide after this is for all of the warriors that are on this call. You need to have a lymphocyte building combination. Those strategies, I believe, need to be divided into 3 categories. First of all, if it's a viral versus a bacterial pathogen, what is it that you're going to build and how do you want to build it? Number 2, if that person has fungal overgrowth and elevated mycotoxins, you are likely looking at DNA modifications or adducts. So your pre-treatment protocol, meaning before you go after infections, what do you want to do with your immune system to secure it? Chemical load, do you know where it is? Is it increasing or is it at least stable? If you're looking at chemical loads that are increasing, then on our side, we're not going to go after the infection yet. It's too much of a burden for the immune system. Remember, there is an enormous difference between going after viral pathogens like herpetics, Coxsackie, parvo, versus bacterial infections like a tick-borne, right? Going after something like West Nile is very, very different than going after Borrelia burgdorferi, and how you're building your T cells and trying to create a kind of a portfolio of T cells, right? That is either more in the helper designation or the natural killer starts to become very important. So this snip on the bottom is just looking at resveratrol, EGCG, and vitamins that can be used to modulate lymphocytes. I'm not suggesting that this article is the only one to go to. What I am showing you over here, EGCG, and for all the warriors, the ingredient that comes from green tea is a pretty useful strategy. Resveratrol for us is commonly in that protocol. There are certain vitamins, and again, they differ between viral versus bacterial. A couple of caveats, and a really important one if you're a practitioner, make sure that you're not using ingredients that are going to feed the infections that you're going after. Right. And so I think that's probably a slide and a topic for another time. But what you want to make sure is you're not making the army of the invader even stronger by using ingredients. We know already manganese, zinc, some of the favorite materials for Borrelia burgdorferi to use for replication. So again, just be very careful as you're constructing things, but no, there has to be a pre-treatment. You're not going to want to just get in there, whether you're the warrior that's dealing with this, or whether you are the clinician that's treating it. You don't just want to jump in and try and go after an infection. You want to know where the immune system is, right? You want to know how that person is regulating. You want to know which infections are there. You want to understand the titer levels of each one. You want to match it to the symptoms to really get an idea of where are the symptoms. Is it arms? Is it legs? The initial presentation, was it right arm to right leg? Is that what progression looked like? Was it right arm to left arm? It's going to start constructing a picture of what kind of infection. Right? Is it something that's likely living in the C-spine, like herpes simplex 1? Is it something, so arms, right? Is it something that's living at the base of the spine, so herpes simplex 2? Can you get an understanding from the progression speed and direction of which infections are the priority? Did you get your titer levels? Do you know where infections are by comparison to each other? And do you have a pre-treatment strategy and understand where the immune system is before you go after the infection? And I think those things start to become really key. If you are a warrior, here are your home protocols. So the question is, how do you make a great partner? Right? How do you partner with the folks that are treating you? From my vantage point, there are a lot of things that need to be done. And I don't think it's going home and taking a gazillion supplements. That's just not my style, right? I don't think that's your part of the partnership. Instead, your part of the partnership from my standpoint is, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating enough calories? Are you eating the right kind of calories? Are you hydrating? And do you actually have clean water? Where is your stress response? Okay, so now with that, and using the term woo-woo medicine, here's what I would tell you. I think for a lot of us, we underestimate the role of stress, mental stress, emotional stress in immune control. Meaning the higher the emotional stress, the higher the degree of depression or anxiety, the more dysfunctional an immune system is going to get. And although the idea of stress control is something that I think a lot of us think it would be a good thing, I'm not sure we all look at it from an important or essential thing in healing. And so here's the reason for this slide. Up until this point, we're talking about labs and symptoms. There is a big part from my standpoint of therapy that is not medicine related. It's all the rest. And I would tell you, for all the warriors, it's the thing that you have to do and nobody else can do it. Right. So not family members, not friends, and not the clinical team that you have. Instead, you're going to have to decide how you want to navigate the things that are critical for health. And so saying things like meditation, sleep, stress control, grounding with copper, green tea for EGCG, medicinal mushrooms. I think it's easy to say, but now from an ugly slide standpoint, let's look at 4 references to articles that describe it. So starting top down, number 1, meditation enhances immune function through different mechanisms. Several studies have shown that different forms of meditation result in an increase in natural killer cells and B lymphocytes. right? So we just came from a lymphocyte slide and we just watched lymphocytes that were too low initially that came up by about 200 points or a little under 200 points. We know the target is still higher. And the question is, what do we want to do to improve an immune function and to get the natural killers that we're looking for? Okay, on the left side, and the second one, immune modulation resulting from 5 major mushrooms. So the idea of medicinal mushrooms. And so you're seeing that just very first statement, it is well established that mushrooms are adept at immune modulation and hematopoietic stem cells. So building stem cells, right? Lymphocytes, macrophages, and T cells. The one caution is if you are somebody that has a lot of mycotoxic gunk is the term that I'll use. So if you got a lot of mold overgrowth, you're going to want to be very careful and probably at this point avoid medicinal mushrooms. If you are not somebody that has high mycotoxin levels, again, the idea of mushrooms in your diet and mushroom teas can be very beneficial. Third one down now on the right, grounding. So again, I think for a lot of people, you're thinking this is woo-woo. I'm showing you these articles to say it's not. And I think it's important for all of us to kind of get into 2023 and be up to date, not just with medicine, but with all the lifestyle stuff. And so the question is energy part of creating disease or fixing disease? Is energy in a body part of healing or progressing? And the answer is, yeah, it is. What do you need to start getting energy regulating in the body? What we know is acupuncture has been around, I don't even know how long. We know it's been thousands of years. What is the likelihood that an energy movement strategy like acupuncture would survive this long if there wasn't a credence to it? It means you don't have to necessarily be somebody that understands acupuncture. And I would tell you, for me, my understanding of it is poor at best. I think what is important as far as a takeaway is bodies of energy, and you are going to have to keep energy in balance. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I think there's a lot of expensive technologies to try and regulate energy. Over here, we have not found that to be a strategy that we use. It doesn't mean you can't use it. It does, however, mean that grounding is a very, very well-established way to improve the kind of electricity in a body and favor health. And so you are looking at an article that is describing the effects of grounding, meaning taking your shoes off and going and walking around on the earth, right, on grass and dirt. Grounding reduces pain and alters the number of circulating, and those are white cells. So they're talking about neutrophils and where we just came from, lymphocytes. Okay, so imagine you are looking at just one of countless articles describing the idea of energy, specifically from grounding or connecting your bare feet, and I like hands as well, to grass and soil. What we always like is copper branches as well. So I get that we have now come out of science and into what people would consider woo-woo. I'm asking, please, let's stop thinking about this stuff as non-essential or something that isn't involved in health and in the immune system. What I'm showing you is 4 different sites just describing the importance. And so talking about grounding properly or increasing the amount of energy in the earth that you're walking on top of. We like the idea of getting sticks that have fallen down, actually running around them with copper wire. So copper wire that you could find on any site online or in pretty much any major home store, and actually creating in a grid those twigs or sticks wrapped in copper. The studies have already proven that you can bring up the electrical potential of the ground in that way, and that when humans walk on that ground, they will in fact improve their own electrical potential or electrical health. And what you're looking at over here is a very specific article saying, hey, improving electricity by grounding, it doesn't quite say that, it says grounding, will improve the immune system. And going back up to a couple slides before this one, the ugly slide that was kind of that pink and white, and those two side by side, looking at the increase in lymphocytes or T cells. Remember, those are your fighters. That's your actual military. If your military isn't strong, if your count isn't high enough, and you try and go after pathogens, it is not likely you're going to win. So I don't know that you have an option if you have these pathogens to not go to war. Again, if I tell you, out of everybody that we have looked at that has motor neuron disease, everybody that we have measured for tick-borne infections, almost 100%, or everybody -5. And out of the 5 that did not have Borrelia burgdorferi as an IgM active, 3 were familially inherited, meaning that was their primary culprit. And 2, when they came on in, for us, they didn't look like true motor neuron or ALS. Okay. And everybody else has been IgM or an immune system actively seeing and trying to fight that infection. And the next slide that we saw, that pink and white, what's happening to your army. And as you'd imagine, it's getting slaughtered. And so could you, if you are on the clinical team side, just go and try and battle infections? Probably not. Could you, if you're the warrior, so let's say you're not going and working with a clinical team at all. Let's say that you're using things that are anti-pathogenic, antibacterial, antiviral at home. Could you do that without improving your army first? The answer is you could, but you're probably not going to win that war. And then the last article, bottom left-hand side, it is actually evaluating the difference between transcendental meditation and traditional meditation practice. And so what they're describing, this technique of meditation, so transcendental in particular, has been studied and seems to have, this is their conclusion of this article, significant effect on immune cells manifesting in the different circulating levels of lymphocyte subsets, so helpers and killers. The significant effect of transcendental meditation on the neuroendocrine axis and its relationship with the immune system may partly explain our results, and their results were showing improvements, right? So those improvements. And so again, the reason I'm spending so much time over here, this really is a partnership. Part of this is clinical and medicine, and part of it is all the rest. I don't think medicine fixes diseases, although in the world of motor neuron, I'm not sure that lifestyle can either. And so going back to the term of partnership, I think it really is that. And again, for me, it's not the idea at home of using a bunch of expensive machines. We haven't found that that's working. Or expensive supplements. We haven't found that that's working. And over here, oftentimes we will make changes and reduce the amount of supplements for that reason. Instead, what we're finding is identify key underlying factors, infections, chemicals. We've looked at both so far. Get a clear idea of what the immune system has to say about this whole thing, and then improve immune system as a pre-treatment prior to going to those infections. All right. You guys saw how ugly it was when I tried to run the last video. But as a masochist, I'm now going to try and run another video. Hang on. This is Donnie, and let me just see. It's a fast 1.5-minute video. So let me see, first of all, we can stop the share. And then let me get this one. All right. Video's on. All right. Show me what you got. All right. And hey, let me see that $1 million smile. Okay. Last time that you were able to lift your legs?
It was 6, 7, 8 months ago. What? July.
All right, so we are February, middle of February right now. Valentine's Day was yesterday. So the last time that you could lift your legs like this was July of this last year.
Of last year, yeah. It's awesome.
So before, you were saying, Rach,
He couldn't even move a millimeter. Not even like that. He couldn't do. This is just incredible. Like to lift.
Oh my goodness.
I can't even believe that he's doing. Like he can't believe he's doing it. I haven't seen this much smiling, going fully forward, so you can push back. Lifting himself up like that.
I just realized the same thing.
Donnie.
Donnie just pulled himself forward.
He hasn't been able to do that in a very, very, very long time. Doing awesome. Pull you forward. The chair.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'll turn off our video now. All right, hang on. Let me grab my slide deck again. Okay, here we go. All right. So again, the question is, why am I showing you these? First, let me put a giant thank you out there to Tommy and Anna and to Donnie and Rachel for allowing these slides. Let's look at Donnie from a lab point of view and kind of get a sense of, oh, sorry, guys. Oh, hang on. No wonder. Okay. And then let me show you Donnie's actual numbers. So, again, the question is, if we can get these kinds of infections and underlying toxins under control, would we expect to see improvement? And so, Donnie, we were doing multiple treatments. These are the numbers I showed you before, where you're taking levels of IgG. These are his before. Donnie had been diagnosed in 2019. He'd had years of ongoing treatment, over 35 vitamins a day, targeted infections, ongoing antibiotics, multiple SOTs. In spite of that fact, when he came over here, which was May of 2022, these are his levels. And these look pretty bad, right? We know, again, IgG in the past was considered to be something that was not involved with disease or didn't cause disease. We know that to be very, very different now. And so here is somebody that's been treated ineffectively, right? But for multiple years. And no surprise, during that period of time, he did not see improvement and instead had ongoing functional decline. What you're seeing over here is the two treatments. So July, that's his initial, now on the right, on the left side, followed by October, which is treatment, or again, treatment that's taking into consideration the kinds of things that we've already talked about, right? Making sure pre-treatment is in place, making sure you really know the infections that are in play, making sure that you know where the immune system is. And so left side, you can see all the reds showing up. Right side, you can see this enormous change. And remember, this is preceding the video that you saw, which is February of 2023. So July 2022, in an individual that was diagnosed in 2019 with no real improvement and instead a lot of worsening during that period of time, 2019 to 2022. Now you're looking at labs predicting what's going to happen next. So July to October. I would tell you there are a lot of things that we did in addition to treating Borrelia burgdorferi, and that one of kind of the linchpins or key components for Donnie's improvement was treating herpetic infections. We were not able to effectively get access to those herpetic infections until Borrelia burgdorferi was low enough. So you're looking at one of the first steps that we took, expecting that we ultimately needed to be able to get to the herpes viruses that were IgG elevated, but knowing this is our first step. And then after this, doing a number of things to improve the immune system before we went after the herpetics. And the video that you just saw, right, that is February 2023. So between October and that February, what do you think we were doing, right? Before we went after the herpetics in February, we were going back and improving the immune system, treating other infections in the tick-borne group, and making sure the immune system was ready to go to war. Okay, post-attack. So the attack being you, if you're the clinician, or if you're the warrior trying to go after these infections. So once you do, the goal from our standpoint is make sure that you're aggressive and make sure you have things on board that are going to help the immune system be able to identify the fact that those infections are now about and probably ready to attack. I would tell you my own philosophy on this whole thing. I don't think it's the infections that are causing motor neuron disease. So I get that that's a funny 180-degree about face from where we've been talking about things. Here's the bottom line. Lots of people have lots of infections. And so because we were just talking about herpes infections, And the estimate is over 90% of the population worldwide has herpes infections. And so if it was that linear, think about all the people that have tick-borne infection, but don't ever go on to develop motor neuron damage, resulting in something like ALS. And so what is separating the people that have neuroinflammatory disease from these infections and everybody else? Again, thinking about this, if over 90% of the world has herpetic infections at one point or another in their lives, they've got IgG, then how come only some people are developing these diseases of neuroinflammation? Consider the fact that certain people can't see these infections. They can't treat them. They can't effectively go after them. They can't win that war. And so just going after the infection, just trying to get a treatment strategy for the infection is not enough. Instead, an immediate post-attack therapy should be ensuring better visibility for the immune system. So ahead of time, training and educating and growing T cells. So thymus gland derivatives as an example, right? To educate T cells and improve the adaptive immune system. And as well, increasing your army. And then afterwards, we know already you're going to have to use things that are going to sensitize the immune system to these infections, because you are likely looking at folks that do not have immune systems that can easily see, understand, or effectively treat these infections. Make sure perfusion is adequate. So, can your medications get to the deep, dark reaches? Are they crossing the blood-brain barrier? And so you can use something like VEGF as a blood level indicator of perfusion. You don't have to, but you do want to make sure you're not just dumping medications in, especially post-treatment when you really, really need to support the immune system, and then find yourselves in a situation where those medications aren't getting to where they need to get to. 2 additional therapies, and I would tell you we are getting close to being finished. Hang on, let me just get a time check. Okay, a couple of additional therapies for the battle. Nootropic as a category of medications and adding new cells. So on the category of nootropics, the question is, can you make neurons stronger, better, increase survivability, increase pliability? Can you increase the brain-derived nootropic factor that neurons need to stay healthy and survive? So imagine if you are unleashing these infections from a treatment standpoint, you're going after the infections. Of course, they're living. They're not just going to go away. Instead, they're going to fight back. Do you have the right amount of army? Do you have the right balance of army? And aside from that, are you protecting neurons? Okay. If you are clinical on this call, know in the absence of protecting neurons during this storm, you would expect to see just a total decimation, right? Because we are oftentimes looking at the causes of motor neuron damage. And so if you're going to go and wake up that beast, right, you want to make sure that the neurons are protected and that they are protected throughout this entire approach. Otherwise, although you might win the battle, you'll lose the war, right? So you could wake these up, you could see slight improvements in tighter levels, suggesting that you're getting the upper hand in these infections, only to find rapid, aggressive progression afterwards as you're watching an immune system that can no longer keep up, and you're watching neurons that are getting damaged. And so the 2 SNPs online, to the right-hand side, number 1. So repeated administration of exosomes was able to improve the motor performance and slow down the clinical progression of ALS. One thing that is important in our estimation, clinical trials, as most of you know, are administered by lumbar puncture. We believe the same to be true. And so although they can be administered by IV, our approach, our thinking is exosomes, rather than endogenous or exogenous stem cells and lumbar puncture. And we can always talk more about that at a later time. And then below that, one example of a nootropic, which is cerebrolizin. It's something that can be effective. You're looking at an explanation describing cerebrolizin reducing excitotoxic damage blocking overactivation of calcium-dependent proteases and scavenging free radicals, specifically in ALS. And so, again, are you protecting your motor neurons? And are you planting new cells? Because as you're going through this battle, right, what you're going to see is a decline in your lymphocytes over periods of time. So that's going to look like measuring lymphocytes to see what your count is, and then going to war and seeing a decrease likely in those lymphocytes. So meaning an army, your army, right, that is struggling because of that war with the pathogen. And then you're looking to bring that level back up again and to support the level of healthy cells. On our side, we like the idea of potentially using exosomes for that reason. And again, to protect all neurons from the very damaging and debilitating effects of these pathogens. There is more to come. And so what I'm saying over there, I'm trying to get better. And as a center, we're trying to get better at doing these more often. And oftentimes for me, I just don't take the time, but I will try. You have below the information on the center. So if you're trying to reach us, info@Body Science is the email. You could reach me directly. I just don't reach out to my own email or check my own email as often as I should. I am at Amy, AMY, at bodyscience.life. But usually it will be my front desk that ultimately responds. The website has a bunch of information on the program. It also has a lot of the videos. What I'll do is I'll put the full video. That clip of Donnie is actually a piece of about an hour-long video. And so over the course of this week, I'll get it over there. That way you can hear a full explanation of the other treatments that Donnie used. And I believe I might have a longer video of Tommy as well, Tommy and Anna. If I do, we'll make sure to post that. It was great having everybody here today. I hope this was helpful. And I look forward to a time where this disease just falls into the category of treatable. And that's what we're all looking for. And I think that's what is very definitely on its way. Our improvements suggest that. All the updated research articles suggest the same. I think we are looking at a new era for this disease. And I know all of us just welcome it. Take care, guys. Bye.